An app or a software, it is a business. I mean, nobody does it for the art of just making stuff. Unless you're a student and you just want to get better at your craft, you most probably will want to do this for money, and that's good. It is a business. Now, there are different categories of software. Apps, it's one of them, but an app can also be an app with a back end or an app that runs locally. Let it be the phone, the iPad, the computer, meaning that it doesn't have a back end. Now, this is something that you really need to grasp and understand as the types of software that can be provided out there. It's the different scope to have a localized system that runs on the hardware against the back-end system that runs on servers. And they are different risks associated with each kind of software. These risks goes from legal liability all the way to the possibility of financial liability or no liability, depending on how well you structure your terms of use, licensing, or user agreements. Now, why are there different risks and which is more riskier than the other? Well, a backend is usually more risky than just having a localized app. When using backend, you're running things on a server, which means infrastructure, which means overhead and costs. Those, for the most part, are going to be fixed costs, meaning that you're going to carry them whether you have 0 users or X amount of users. They will increase with more users, by the way. And in there comes the next risk, which is scalability is profitable or is not profitable. Usually in software, you have the benefit that scalability is one of the few products that you can scale without investment, in the sense of doing capital investments like more machinery or more cars or more buildings. But you do need processing power and storage capacity, and you need to manage the usage of APIs too. Now, like any business, this requires doing some math of what's your fixed cost and what's your break-even point with your software, your app, your service. One of the real problems with infrastructure is when you get caught in having too little clients, too little profit, and too much overhead, and now you have to carry those clients because you have a lousy use of terms or legal shields to just turn off the software. So whenever you're thinking about a project and you think about it having a back end, you for sure need to take into account these things that I'm listing if you want to be safe. The other problem with backend is the fact that you may grow faster than your ability to keep up maintaining the software. Because once you're dealing with backend, then you need to deal with a whole lot of things that are very technical that I'm not gonna get in this video, but that you should really research. To mention a few of them is server loads, risk management, backups, mirror servers, API loads, and a whole world of things that you need to care for. That usually, like in a real world scenario, you actually need a team to carry that forward. I do own a SaaS company. We do ERP Next accounting systems, which is a B2B kind of product. And not only that, we actually manage our own servers, which brings me to the next point with backend and the fact that you need to handle versioning of your software in a compatible way, not to destroy your client's data. Not only that, you also have to choose from the beginning the right structure for that data, meaning the database is the kind of database that you're going to use for that software to function in a proper way. So if you haven't gotten the message so far, the message is that don't start with anything that has backend if you are a newbie to the software world. Stay to apps that are localized. That's the safest bet. But always remember that you're doing this as a business. If for whatever reason you're stubborn enough to start something with a backend, then you really need to validate your idea. You need to get beta users. You need to get waiting lists. And you at least need 1 or 2 zero ground users, meaning the ones that are gonna use your software in real world scenario and live the pain of it not working properly without suing you. And again, with backend, doing byte coded applications is a real risk, more so if you're trying to do something that's B2B and that you actually have to comply with security, authorization, redundant systems, etc., etc., etc. So going back to apps, those two are still a business. And like any business, there will come a time where you will need to make the decision to abandon the product if it's not profitable. Now there, your risk in apps is usually time. And most solo developers or indie developers, they actually like the part of making the product. Actually, too much, I would say. They like that part of the business. And they get what I called feature fever, which is taking an app that is not making money and just adding more and more and more features in the hopes that it will somewhere along the way get monetized. So even for your apps, you need to define clear milestones in order to make the decision either to go ahead and version 2, version 3, or let it die. This is not to say that starting in the app business is not going to carry any kind of investment. At least you have to have a MacBook, reliable MacBook that'll set you back maybe $2,000, and you have to have a couple of phones, maybe $1,000. So in all, you might invest around between $3,000 to $4,000, depending on how high end you want to go. And then are the services that you need to pay. Apple Store is another $100 yearly. If you're doing vibe coding, that'll set you back around in between $50 to $200 monthly, depending on how much you're prompting. So again, there is an investment that you need to recover from your apps. Now, when I'm referring to apps, I'm referring to localized apps in this case, right? And the other thing that you need to do is to iterate as fast as possible. The worst thing that you can do is fall in love with an app. Now, I know there's the saying that you cannot quit, but sometimes you have to. Properly knowing when to quit, that's being wise. And you only get wise with experience. Now, I bet that you have heard the saying, do what you love, and business, do what you really love, because business is really, really hard. It's not any difference in the software business, whether it's a back-end product or a localized product. It's going to be hard. Probably in this day and age, making the app, if it's localized and a simple app, it's going to be fast if you do it with AI. I'll grant you that. If you go back end, it's not going to be fast. But well, even as fast as it can be, you will have to spend time creating it, designing it, debugging it. More so if you're doing it with pure vibe coding or AI coding, however you want to label it. Your first apps, most probably, they're going to fail. You will have to abandon them and iterate, making new apps and new apps until you get better at it, and some will make money eventually. So how do you keep yourself in the business? By loving what you're doing. That's where the loving part comes in, and it is hard. I mean, it is really, really hard. So should you start a software business and be aware that it is what you're starting, whether it's localized apps or a backend, meaning that in all cases you'll have users on the other end that are going to be your responsibility? Well, the answer to that depends. If you think that this is going to be a passive income, then don't do it, because it is not going to be a passive income. Like all in life, it requires sacrifice, it requires time, it requires dedication, and it requires the urge for you to get better and better with each new app, with each new product, with each new feature. Not for you, but for your clients. And most probably you will have to do that without earning money. And I know in YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, you most probably only see successful people claiming to have passive incomes from all ranges to a couple of $100 to millions of dollars. But reality is that 90% of apps die without any users, with no income. Software products, meaning the ones that have back end, behave the same way. So like in every business, you are risking capital. You will risk the most precious capital resource that you have, which is time. And even if you get revenues from your apps, you still have to face uncertainty, which is hard to live with. Not knowing if the next month your apps are going to make the same revenue, or for some weird reason they'll stop. But like everybody that watches YouTube, you have seen the beautiful part of getting successful at it. The real personal decision is if it's worth the risk and the pain. If you're not sure if this is for you, whether let it be apps or another type of business, visit our website, wizeconomics.com. I'm gonna leave the link to the site in the description, and there you can find free resources and paid resources to validate ideas, to validate yourself as a businessman or woman. Go through those resources because they're gonna help you out make a decision about yourself. And if after all that your decision is that yes, you want to be an entrepreneur or a solo developer, then may I say welcome to the fight. Stay safe out there, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.